just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up. This is now my second interview under my belt, so I'm feeling a little cocky today. So I'll be a lot more confident than I was the other week when I interviewed Lister, which was really good, by the way. Mr. Austin, I know you. I think I know quite a bit about you just based on your bio and everything, but I realized that I would never be able to do your bio the justice that you can. So if you don't mind, well, actually, let's backtrack a bit. I wanted to kind of introduce you to what this is for.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, I started a group on Facebook. It's called The Grind Defined. And it actually has a few different purposes to educate potential entrepreneurs, to motivate them, to generate group activity, meaning if one person has a skill set that maybe another doesn't have, we can kind of all share our skill sets and work together to get to a common goal. And also, one of the things that I think is the most important actually is to expose the members to people and resources that maybe they don't know about. Because I learned early on in my entrepreneurial journey that I didn't know anything. So that's the main goal of it. We just got started about a week or so ago, and we're already sitting at about 160 members. And that's with very little outreach, just people that are interested in learning, about the resources that are out there. So that being said, I wanted to go ahead and give you an opportunity to kind of introduce yourself to the group and just give us a little bit about your background.
Okay, just a second here. Now I lost my little window here so I can see. I got you in two windows just to trying to make sure that my head's in here. Oh well. Anyway,
I can see you.
All right. Okay. Let's see. Where do I start? So I'm John Austin. I work for a private nonprofit foundation called NC IDEA. I'll talk some more about that in a while. I've now been here about 8 years, and my responsibilities have changed over time. For the first 6 years, I was responsible for our NC IDEA Labs program, which is an accelerator-like program, which is how I bumped into you, I think.
Yes, sir.
Then for the last 2 years, I've been running our ecosystem program, where we make grants to organizations around the state. I'll talk some more about that. And now, starting next month, I'm going to go back and run the Labs program. But my background, before I came to NC IDEA Labs, I was involved in several startups along the way. On the executive team or as CEO of that organization. And both of those were in the technology space. One was a software company, the other was a hardware company. And my background before that is as a software engineer, although it's been decades since I've written a line of code, so I can't pretend to do that anymore.
I got you. So I kind of broke down the subject matter that I wanted to go over into a couple of groups. And the first one I wanted to talk about was like the education, because that Idea Labs was very helpful for me. I don't know if you remember when we went through that, but I wanted to see if, because some of the things I found very helpful about it was the ability or learning how to ID customers and target those particular customers, kind of see about market fit and those kinds of things. But I wanted to see if you could touch a little bit more on what Idea Labs does.
Okay, so as it's structured today, which is a little different from the way it was many years ago, it's a 4-week program that focuses completely on customer discovery. And so we all the time bump into entrepreneurs. They've got this great idea. They think it's going to solve the world's problems. They're all ready to go out and start selling it to folks or building it. And they haven't really stopped and talked to enough customers. Yeah. There's one thing that, as I look back over the hundreds of entrepreneurs I worked with over the last 8 years, the ones that have gone out and really understood their customer's problem are the ones I think that are most likely to succeed. Most entrepreneurs, they've got this brilliant idea, they're thinking in the solution space, and they haven't thought enough in the problem space of their customer. How bad a problem is it for that customer? How big a problem? How painful is it? And so during these 4 weeks, we really try and get the founders to focus completely on that piece of understanding what the customer's problem is first before they get too far down the path of a solution.
Gotcha. Now, some of the focus that I'm going to have in my questions, some of it is going to be based on my background being from a very small town. It's about an hour and a half from here, but it's called Wallace. You might have probably never heard of it. But anyway, anyway, there's some opportunities for learning in a city like a town like Wallace that's, just out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak. But do you have any outreach to places like that, or do you have any plans of maybe taking your program remote or anything like that?
So I won't say we have plans, but it's clearly something I want to start thinking about. So the great thing over the last 2 years, as I've been involved with our ecosystem grant program, I've been going all over the state, and it's been really interesting and exciting for me as this tech-centered guy who's done spent since 1981, I've lived here in the Triangle. But it's been really exciting to get out around the state and seeing all of the entrepreneurs that are out there and the resources that are available out there. So the small business centers that are at any community college, the SBTDCs that are at, I think, most of the universities in the North Carolina system. So there are a few resources out there, and don't get me wrong, I get that life is different out in the rural areas of the state. And so what that has done, though, is started to drive my thinking of where we take labs in the future and how we've had a very successful program over the last 8 years. The folks that have been through the program have found it incredibly helpful, but it's not helpful that we're just here in Durham, North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so figuring out a way to scale it either through virtual, doing stuff like this, or through teaching folks in other parts of the state our curriculum, basically, what we do over that 4 weeks, and helping them be able to offer something local. So some combination of those two things, I hope that we're able to expand our geographical reach of the program.
Yeah. And, speaking of like the remote or virtual programs and maybe teaching others how to do it, I think, just spitballing that an opportunity might be partnerships with some of the churches. Because I know in particular in my small town, there's a few churches that have, reasonable size memberships, and a lot of them are entrepreneurial minded. So I think that could be a good resource, and gathering place for these people.
Maybe we ought to talk about that sometime.
I think we should.
Okay. All right.
I'd love to help with that. Anything I can do to help, in my small town, I'd be more than happy to make introductions and do all of that. So I'll do some legwork if you need. The next thing I wanted to talk about was some of the grant programs. Idea Seed, I guess, is a good one to start with. Can you tell me a bit about that one?
Right. So we have 2 grant programs that are for startup companies. Mm-hmm. One is the Seed Grant, which is a $50,000 grant. The other is the Micro Grant, which is a $10,000 grant. And twice a year we run a competition for those grants, and you have to choose which one to apply for. You can't apply for both. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, just a week ago was the deadline for this cycle.
Yeah.
For anyone interested, they'll have to look forward to the next cycle when the deadline will be probably around the end of September. Mm-hmm. But the idea for these grants is that it can take you from where you are today. In the case of the Seed Grant, the $50,000 grant, you really have to have some validation that your product might have some legs, either through maybe a couple users or you've done enough customer discovery to validate that. And on our website, there's a table that sort of gives characteristics of companies that are competitive for each of those grants, so you can kind of pick and choose which one to go for.
Yep.
We make 5 of those $50,000 grant awards every 6 months. We make 15 of the $10,000 grant awards. And the $10,000 grant can be just for an idea. It is literally to help you get something off the ground, and then hopefully that you will then be competitive for that $50,000 grant in 6 or 12 months. We unfortunately see a lot of entrepreneurs are very optimistic people. And it has been my observation that entrepreneurs are often not as far along as they really think they are. So we get people that apply for this $50,000 grant, and I'll read the application. I'll say, man, they should have, this is just an idea. This would have been really competitive if they would have applied for the $10,000 grant, but they applied for the $50,000 grant. So that's just sort of a word of advice, is make sure you sort of know that you're going to be competitive for that particular grant.
Okay. Another program that I wanted to talk a bit about or to get your thoughts on was SOAR for female founders. Talk a bit about that.
So when we started SOAR, actually it started with a group over at the American Underground here in Durham. And maybe 4-ish years ago, NCIDEA took it over. And originally it was for female founders of whether or not they had won a grant or been through our labs program. We've kind of changed that program now. So what we found, let me take a step back. What we found is the mentoring and advice and help we were giving those founders was essentially the same as we were giving male founders. And it's like, okay, well, what we really ought to do is be focusing on those issues that are unique to female founders. The reason we started that program is female founders are funded at a much lower rate than startup entrepreneurs in general. And so what we decided to do was just sort of bring that internal, and it's now a series of programs and seminars for female founders that have won NCIDEA grants or been through the labs program. So it's kind of like an internal thing now. Okay. I'm not sure our website reflects that yet.
Yeah, it kind of does. It says you have to be in one of the other programs. Yep. Yeah. So
okay.
It does. Great. Because, I was, one of the questions I posed to Lister kind of along these same lines was the inclusion or diversity question. Because one of the things I've noticed, a lot of conversations that I have with either entrepreneurs of color or female entrepreneurs, there's a lot of excitement around it. They want to learn, they want to get in, they want to launch their businesses and things. But then that doesn't necessarily translate to, like, when I go to networking events or something, like that, there'll be 200 people in the room and 1 or 2 that look like me and 3 or 4 women. So what, if you had to put your finger on or several fingers on where that disconnect might be, what do you think that would be?
Whew.
I know, right?
Yeah. Well,
I told you I was feeling cocky today.
No, and let me actually, before we jump there, which I'm happy to jump there. So one of the core reason that we started that micro grant program was, if you look at, to be competitive at that $50,000 level, you have to have had some amount of resources to get your company to where it is. And so while we weren't being exclusive with that grant, we were excluding people that had the resources to get to that point. And so that was what caused us to start the $10,000 grant program. So, if you're a computer science grad from Duke and you just graduated, and you could, did you go to Duke? I don't want to disparage.
Go ahead, fire away at them.
So I could fire away, I could disparage all the Dukies. You may have, you may be able to call up Aunt Molly and get 20 grand
Absolutely.
to pay your living expenses for the next 6 months, so you can get your company to the point where you be a competitor. And so our hypothesis was that there would be a disproportionate number of women and people of color that can't get to that point. And we have been I should have had these numbers off the top of my head, but we have been we've been pleased that a very high percentage of the micro grant winners are people of color, women, or people from economically distressed counties in North Carolina.
Like Duplin County is tier 2, I believe.
Yeah, okay. So about 2 years ago, we as a foundation started thinking about where we were going. And one of our board members, as we were having the discussion between our board and the staff, said, "Are you being as transformational as you were 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when you started the grant program?" And there was virtually no startup resources available. Those $50,000 grants were transformational to companies.
Yeah.
He asked, "Are you being as transformational as you were then, or are you just being helpful? Are you just funding tech companies that probably would have got there anyway, and you just got them there 12 months sooner? Or you just de-risked the investment from co-founders capital or idea fund partners?" And then the next question was, what about the under-resourced, underserved, underrepresented entrepreneurs around the state?
Yeah.
And we said that'd be a great challenge. And so we have committed going forward that 50% of our effort and 50% of our funding, the seed and micro grants and the ecosystem grants that go to organizations and the engage grants that go to organizations, that we want to reach a point where half of those resources are going to tier 1 and tier 2 economically distressed counties, females, and people of color. And we are taking steps in that direction, and will take a while for that to be impactful. And at the end of the day, we make, between the micro and seed programs, we make 30, 15, 20, 40 grants a year. So, we're making small steps, but we are happy that a disproportionate number of those micro and seed grants are going to tier 1 and tier 2 counties, people of color, and females.
Gotcha. And thank you for sharing that answer with me. That was really timely, because I have this conversation with a couple of people. I've had it recently where they kind of get discouraged along those same lines, because a lot of times you'll hear like investors or whatever say things like, you're not fully vested in the success of your company unless you quit your job and you do this. And a lot of people don't have the resources and the auntie that they can move into the basement with. So that's excellent. Thank you for sharing that with me.
And those to that point, the micro grant does not require that you be full-time on your business. Mm-hmm. The seed grant does not require at the time of the award that you be full-time on your business, but you have to show us that there is a path that you are going to be committed full-time, because those are exactly the issues that we were seeing.
Yeah, that's great. The last thing or section I wanted to talk a little bit about was NC Engage, and honestly, I think we kind of touched a bit on that when we were talking about the churches and the neighborhood and the other neighborhoods, because that's actually something that I would be interested in trying to get some assistance with, whether that's educational or financial or whatever, because I think I'd want to do some programs or some events or something around entrepreneurship, and specifically among the African American community. So if you could, just explain to me a little bit, or us, about what NC Engage does and who can qualify for that and those kinds of things.
Great. So the seed and micro grants are for for-profit companies to help an entrepreneur grow a company. Then we have another set of grants, Engage and Ecosystem, that are targeted at organizations or individuals that are helping entrepreneurs, particularly those helping entrepreneurs in parts of the state that aren't in our backyard here in Durham. So the Engage grants can go to an individual, a civic organization, a church, a government entity. virtually anyone, and they are typically around $5,000, and they are typically for a program, a relatively short-term program or event to help help entrepreneurs. So bring everybody together for a day-long boot camp on how to start a company. We buy the coffee for 1 million cups is one grantee. Mm-hmm. So if you've got an idea, that would, and if you got an idea for something that's like new and different, and you need to try it once to see if it'll work, and then if it works, you could probably find some funding from some other places. That's what those engaged grants are for. The bigger grants are these ecosystem grants that are like $100,000 over 2 years, and that's for not just one program, but for an organization that's doing a bunch of stuff related to helping entrepreneurs, and those have gone to community colleges, entrepreneurship programs at the universities, standalone entrepreneurship programs, and all over the state.
Okay. With NC Engage, if someone was to want to run a program like a one-day event to educate entrepreneurs, would you guys be able to help provide any kind of training information, or is that something that we'd have to come up, or the person at the group that's running it would?
We've actually never had anyone ask us that question. Mm-hmm. We typically, it's just funding. Okay. But because we're 6 or 7 people, and so it's hard for us to do additional programs beyond the ones that we're actually already doing. But I certainly would be open to looking at that.
Okay, awesome. I have some people in mind that I'm probably going to try to bring to your office in the next few weeks.
Okay.
All right, great. Mr. Austin, that was all of my questions. Did you have anything for me?
I wasn't prepared for that question. Okay, no, I don't have anything.
Awesome, sir. Well, I appreciate your time, man. And like I said, this is going to be shared with the entire group. There might be some follow-up questions. If there are, I'll just put them in an email and send them over to you.
Yeah, and if you go to the NC IDEA website on our team page, there's actually, if you find on our team page my short bio, there's actually a link there. I have open office hours every Friday morning if somebody's interested in coming in, and typically it's an entrepreneur who says, "Hey, I've got this idea. What do you think I should be doing with it?" We just kind of kick tires and brainstorm, and I'm always happy to do that.
Awesome. That's because you're a great guy.
All right.
All right, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.